course, U.S. history, and today we discuss one of the most confusing questions in American history. What caused the Civil War? Just kidding, it's not a confusing question at all. Slavery caused the Civil War. Disagree, but what about like states' rights and nationalism, economics? See, from the past, your senior year of high school, you will be taught American government by Mr. Fleming, a white Southerner who will seem to you to be about 182 years old, and you will say something to him in class about states' rights, and Mr. Fleming will turn to you and he will say, a state's right to what, sir? And for the first time in your snotty little life, you will be well and truly speechless. The road to the Civil War leads to discussions of states' rights to slavery and differing economic systems, specifically whether those economic systems should involve slavery, and the election of Abraham Lincoln, specifically how his election impacted slavery, but none of those things would have been issues without slavery. So let's pick up with the most controversial section of the Compromise of 1850, the Fugitive Slave Law. Now, longtime Crash Course viewers will remember that there was already a fugitive slave law written into the United States Constitution. So what made this one so controversial? Under this new law, any citizen was required to turn in anyone he or she knew to be a slave to authorities, and that made like every person in New England into a sheriff, and it also required them to enforce a law they found abhorrent. So they had to be sheriffs, and they didn't even get little gold badges. Double, can I have a gold badge? Awesome, thank you. This law was also terrifying to people of color in the North because even if you'd say been born free in Massachusetts, the courts could send you into slavery if even one person swore before a judge that you were a specific slave. And many people of color responded to the fugitive slave law by moving to Canada, which at the time was still technically an English colony, thereby further problematizing the whole idea that England was all about tyranny and the United States was all about freedom. But anyway, the most important result of the fugitive slave law was that it convinced some Northerners that the government was in the hands of a sinister slave power. Sadly, slave power was not a heavy metal band or Britney Spears' new single or even a secret cabal of powerful slaves, but rather a conspiracy theory about a secret cabal of pro-slavery congressmen. That conspiracy theory is going to grow in importance, but before we get to that, let us discuss railroads. Underrated in Monopoly and underrated in the Civil War. Let's go to the thought bubble. Railroads made shipping cheaper and more efficient and allowed people to move around the country quickly, and they had a huge backer, also a tiny backer, in the form of Illinois Congressman Stephen Douglas, who wanted a transcontinental railroad because, one, he felt it would bind the Union together at a time when it could use some binding, and two, he figured it would go through Illinois, which would be good for his home state. But there was a problem. To build a railroad, the territory through which it ran needed to be organized, ideally as states, and if...
Okay, hi everyone. And so this is being recorded because I started recording when I started the video. And okay, so we're rushing through our discussion of the United States history, and now we're already up to the Civil War. And you can see Stephen Douglas is highlighted here in this video that was showing before this, right before 10 o'clock, and highlighting how already there's opposition emerging, particularly in the southern states where slavery was still in force, to efforts to develop a powerful North American economy with infrastructure, including railroads, linking up this powerful economy because of the belief, and correctly so, in the southern states where slavery was in place, that this area was growing more quickly along with industrialization and the development of more industry-focused economy, whereas this area was still focused upon agriculture and the early commodities of early industrialization, cotton, because of course it's one of the few areas where cotton was grown and to be exported to Great Britain, although of course Britain would get its cotton from other places later. But this area, of course, could not grow cotton up in the northern parts and was, of course, had a lot more water transport, a lot more resources and land and available for other kinds of economic activity. And so industrialization, including because of policies that were adopted to encourage more economic transformation, to exploit economic opportunities. This part of the northern part of what becomes the United States is growing much more quickly than the southern part. So that by the start of the Civil War, the economy of this part of the United States is at least twice the size of the economy in this part of the United States. Its population is growing much more quickly. Of course, there's more and more economic opportunity that can be seen by encouraging the development of new infrastructure, like, for example, this railroad. Everybody's talking about infrastructure, right? Infrastructure for a national economy. So people are building these kinds of infrastructure because they see possibilities of even more money to be made if we do that. And of course, that means more economic growth. And so there's a growing fear and insecurity in this part, in the Confederacy, that this area is becoming more and more populous, more and more rich, and of course, more and more economic resources translate into more and more political influence, right? So even as individual politicians, hello, even as hear you, who's speaking? So even as more individual politicians like Abraham Lincoln, who defeats Stephen Douglas in the 1860 election, are saying, I don't want to threaten slavery. Oh no, I don't want to challenge slavery. I'm not a threat to slavery. We don't want to frighten the southern states into leaving. We don't want a war, even though there's lots of rumors of war coming, right? These southern leaders in the southern areas, they don't trust him. They don't trust people like Abraham Lincoln, because these are words coming out of the mouths of individuals, but they can see that this area of North America that's industrializing, that's becoming economically more modern, that's becoming richer and more populous as people are coming into North America from Europe and also later from Asia and elsewhere are coming in, that this area is becoming more and more powerful. And despite any kind of words coming out of the mouths of people like Abraham Lincoln, that the policies of the federal government are going to be promoting the establishment of a national economy that it really makes this kind of slave-based economy, not just slave-based economy, a slave-based civilization, a slave-based way of life, a slave-based way of thinking, and a traditional, more like feudal traditional way of life is coming under threat. And that's an important point to make. It's not just about money. This war is about money, but it's not just about money. It's not even primarily about money. It's about a supposed way of life. What it means to be a white man in the South, for example, right? Keep that in mind. And maybe I should just go ahead and open up that file here. So we go to the file for the election of 1860. And of course, I have too many files here to open up. So if we go to the election of 1860 file, and of course I go to stop share, and then I go to screen share, and we go to the U.S. election of 1860. That here are the southern states, right? That these states will try to break away from the northern states to create their own Confederate States of America, not the United States of America, Confederate States of America. And they will claim that they're fighting on behalf of the rights of states so that they can have the right to maintain slavery, right? But and of course, in this war, at least half of the people that would die, and 700 to 800,000 people would die in 4 years of fighting. The people that are fighting this war, the overwhelming majority of the soldiers from these southern states, right? The overwhelming majority of the soldiers from these southern states, they don't own slaves. To own a human being as a slave, an enslaved person, that was a big investment. Only rich people own slaves. I mean rich people, but at least 2/3, maybe 3/4, probably more close to 75%, and maybe even more of the soldiers that would fight and die for the Confederacy of the United States, they didn't own slaves. Why were they fighting? Because it was what they felt in their heart, which was obvious that a white man is superior to an enslaved African man. End of story. And that you're born into that world, and it forms your entire way of life. I think we talked about this I can't remember. I kind of mix these things up when I talk about when I talk in my different classes, because I have to talk about nationalism, right? Nationalism. You have had me in my classes. You know that nationalism. The Professor Ben is all about nationalism, and that nationalism emerges along with the widening awareness among the mass of the population that human beings themselves make their own destiny. It's not the will of God, and your position in this world is not given to you by God, right? Your status in this world is not something that you can make. It's something that's assigned to you. That's in traditional societies. In modern societies, and of course, these are ideal, typical notions, right? In modern societies, your status and respect that you get from other people in society supposed to come from what you do, what you achieve. That's modernity. Let me see if I covered this. Let me open up that file again, because, it's kind of important to understand, why are these people fighting a war over slavery? I mean, it's horrible. How can you justify fighting a war over slavery? What's going on with these people, right? So if we go here, and let me see if I can find it here in the file, because I covered in all my classes, and I think I did cover this briefly in the other class. So it's good to bring it up again, because it's a lot, it's interesting, but kind of complicated. Well, not complicated, but it's a new idea for everybody, right? That America is a country born modern. The essence of modernity is that, if somebody asks you, what does it mean to be modern? One way to respond is that in a modern society, the amount of status and respect you get from everybody else towards me, Professor Ben or Fatima or whomever, comes from what we do. So status is based upon achievement, right? And in a modern society, in traditional societies, your status is defined by God, which means by birth, right? That your status in traditional societies is given to you at birth. So your father was a peasant, my father was a peasant, I'm a peasant, my son and daughters will be peasants. Why? Because we're peasants. Supposedly that's the will of God. You come up with some kind of religious justification for it, whether it be God or Allah or whomever, right? And so you're in traditional societies, not modern, in traditional societies, your status is defined by birth. So I'm a baker because my dad was a baker, and my son will be a baker. I'm a soldier because my father was a soldier, his father was a soldier, and so my son will be a soldier. I'm the king because my father was the king and his father was the king, and my son will be the king. Why? Because God wants it that way. So the changes happen in politics in these countries, right? As people become aware of the fact that, what? People can change their status. Through their own actions, human beings can change the amount of respect and esteem they get from other people in the society and the influence they have in society. And they can do it on their own. People become aware of the fact that change happens. It's always a fact, but now they become aware of it because they can see it. Right? We talked about this in the previous class, right? You can imagine some traditional baker family in some village in France starts making lots of money 400 years ago because the king of France has built a new fort close by. So the soldiers are always buying bread from that baker, and that baker now is making big money, which he didn't before. He's making big money baking bread and baguettes for the French army that's located, the king's army that's located close by. Oh, now he's got all this money and he has all this influence and esteem and power. My gosh, wow, God didn't have anything to do with it. He was smart. He exploited an opportunity that he saw. Right? And so people become aware of the possibility of change. And when they become aware of the possibility of change, they become aware of politics. The people through politics make this world. People make this world through policy making. And so what does that mean? It means people want to participate. We have the emergence of public opinion. People want to participate in making policy. They want to participate in choosing who's going to be their leader, because that policy making process and the leaders, they have an impact on me. And they've always been true, but now I've become aware of it. Why? Because the pace of economic change has been accelerating first in Europe. Europe goes through this inevitable process first, about a century ahead of Eastern Europe and the rest of the world. As the shift from ascription to achievement becomes the basis of status within society. People get ambitious, they have dreams, they work to achieve their dreams. You have to believe that you can change your conditions in the world if you're going to have your dreams, your ambitions. And you can't have a modern economy unless that change happens, right? You know, your dreams, that's why you go to college, because I have some dreams of what I want to achieve in this world, right? Whether it be money, respect, power, or all of them. So this text highlights just what I've been saying, right? And so this manifests itself in public opinion, right? People want to participate. And of course, the French Revolution happens when about 25% of the French population living in France are politically aware. 90% of the population in Paris is politically aware in 1789. Out in the countryside in France, you still got people that are traditional. These people, by definition, these people above this line are aware of the fact that human beings make this world. People below this line are still traditional parochial, right? They might live in France. They don't know what France is. Not really. They just know their village. They're probably illiterate, right? They don't go beyond their village, right? Their whole lives, they live and die, not moving more than, several kilometers from where they were born. Now, there are a group of people that oppose change. They're aware of change and they oppose it. And that's the traditional ruling elite. That's, King Louis XVI of France. That's the bishops, the popes, not all of them, the traditional ruling elite, the kings, the nobles. And then there's an emerging group that are pro-change. They're aware of the possibility of change and they want change to happen. And this group is where you find the nationalists. They want change on behalf of this thing called France. They know exists, that there's this group of people that more or less live within this territory called the Kingdom of France, that have a common destiny, more or less, and that my well-being depends upon its well-being. And so I become concerned about France's well-being because it impacts upon my well-being as somebody who lives in France, who's French.
I am.
Yes. So this is, but this line moves down, but it's a slow process. This happens first in England, where the Industrial Revolution starts, right? Among Ashkenazi Jews also, because they're involved in trade for generations. They've been focused on economics and trade. So they become politically aware first. So 100% of the people living in England become politically aware only in 1850. Right? This line moves down to most of the adults of England becoming politically aware. You can see in France, it's a little bit later. In Russia, it's not even until the First World War that 100% of people living in the Russian Empire become politically aware. Oriental Jews, Turkey, 1950. After World War II, Egypt, 1980, when I was 18 years old. Iran, 1980 as well, when I'm 18 years old. Kurds and Gypsies among the last of this group. So this happens during the Cold War in the Middle East. But it happens first in Europe, and that's why this class is in English, because Europe has a big power advantage over these people, over the Middle East, over Africa, over Asia. But the impact with the Europeans and European imperialism and colonialism, as well as European trade, will accelerate this inevitable process in the rest of the world. Okay, but keep that in mind. America is a country born modern. If you're going to choose to go to the United States, you've got to believe and understand that you can change your condition in this world through your own choices and actions. So America is founded by people that are politically aware, except, of course, for the enslaved people. They don't choose to go to America. They're enslaved. So now keep in mind, this description is the basis for status. In other words, your status comes from your family's birthright. That doesn't completely disappear. So even in places like, of course, like England, right? If you're belong to the royal family, you might be a complete idiot, but you have lots of influence. People want to hear what you, King Charles III, have to say, because, or the Prince William, let's pick on the crown prince. What is Prince William's view on anything? Why? Because he's the crown prince. He didn't do anything to earn that. He was born crown prince as the next king of England after Charles III dies. He didn't earn that. He's born that way. But, oh yes, tell us, Prince William, what do you think about this, that, and the other thing? Ooh, very. So ascription doesn't disappear as a basis of status. And that manifests itself in somehow the political authority within a country that a name, a family name comes from. And you even have that in the United States. If your last name is Kennedy, oh, Kennedy, Robert Kennedy Jr. is running for president. What does Robert Kennedy Jr. have to say about the coronavirus and COVID vaccines and so on? Even though he's he's nuts. He's 69 years old. He's crazy. But people pay attention to him because he's got the Kennedy name. He belongs to the Kennedy dynasty, the Kennedy dynasty, like Prince William belongs to the Windsor dynasty, right? But America is one of the least descriptively defined societies in the world, along with Israel. But it's still even in the United States. If you have the right last name, you might be a moron, but you somehow have more influence because you have the right family name. And this is not just US, like in Japan, I think I told you in a previous class, something like 60 to 70% of the parliamentary seats passed down in the Japanese diet are inherited by the sons and maybe the daughters of previous members of the parliament. So it's passed down family member to family member. So there's still a strong ascriptive element in Japan, despite the imperial Japanese fascist government that ruled for 20 years, right? But yeah, the ascription manifests itself in terms of the political influence that having the right name. Of course, you see it also elsewhere, like there's the Taft family. The Koreans know about the Taft-Katsura agreement by which the US in 1905 agreed to acknowledge Japan's hegemony in Korea in return for Japan acknowledging America's hegemony in the Philippines. Taft, the Taft family. That's an Ohio dynastic political dynasty, the Taft family. If you have the name Taft, you get more credit because you have the last name T-A-F-T, Taft. And there are lots of those families. The Clark family in Pennsylvania, the Bush family in Texas, the Kennedy family in Massachusetts. You can find them. And you have it in the United States, to get back to the Civil War, right? That you have that descriptive element that defines what it means to be Southern civilization in the United States, right? That these people living here, right, live in a world in which you can be born a man and you are respected and you don't have to do anything. Just by breathing, I'm an American Southern man living in the South, and I'm better than half the population that's Black and Indian and the half that's female. And I don't have to do anything. Hooray! I like this world. I'm a white man in the South. I'm respected. I'm better than you, and I don't even have to do anything. You Black person, you woman, ha ha! I'm going to fight to keep that because it defines who I am. I mean, Black people should be treated equally to white people? No way. So as I said, most of those Confederate soldiers, at least maybe more than three-quarters, they didn't own slaves, but they fought and died to keep slavery because it's their way of life. They know it's true in their heart. Obviously, they felt strongly about it. I mean, by some estimates, that 20% of the population of this state of white male population, maybe 19% of the white male population in Mississippi died in the American Civil War. They obviously felt very strongly about this issue. So, and of course, it hasn't gone away completely. It's ascription doesn't disappear completely anywhere. Again, maybe it's pretty much gone in South Korea. I mean, people don't really pay much attention to the former ruling family of Korea, of the Chosun Korea. Israel, I think among the population there, again, names still are important, but not like they are in Europe, right? If you have that aristocratic lineage in your name, like von der Leyen or Herman van Rompuy, or some other indication that your family were the traditional dynastic nobility, the Yangban of Europe, it still counts for something in European politics, even if people become uncomfortable about that fact. We don't like to admit it either in the US, but it makes a difference. And of course, so anyway, but we got to get back to the Civil War. So more on that discussion on what else do I want to highlight here about the shift from ascription to achievement. So, of course, some of the critical issues that accompany this is that, one, political participation. These are the 4 critical trends that associate the shift from ascription to achievement as the basis for gaining esteem and respect in society, right? Political participation. People want to participate in shaping this change because they know that people make this change happen, so they want to participate in the change, right? Because it affects me. They also go from becoming just members of small, powerful, emotionally intense in-group communities. So I go from being the peasant paisano Benedetto in the family De Dominicis in the village of Capitignano. I go to becoming an Italian, and I start caring a lot about Italy. I might even fight and die for Italy, or for France, or for Russia, or for Korea, or for Japan, or for China, or for US. Nationalism emerges. The third feature is you start seeing the emerging public demand for reform. The creating statewide rules and roles, statewide institutions, right? If we're going to compete for status and respect, I got to know what the rules are. What are the institutions that, what does it mean, to become rich unless we have one currency? If we all have different ways of trading, what does this mean? We want one set of rules for taxation, one set of rules for trade and commerce, one set of rules for understanding what does it mean to become more and more educated. Oh, I have a bachelor's degree. Oh, I have a master's degree. Oh, I have what a PhD. What did that mean, right? So, and the fourth factor is elite iteration. So as I mentioned, right, you go back and you look at the schedule, this diagram, not the schedule, right? You got this group. These are the traditional ruling elites. They're the kings. They tend to be the kings, the bishops, the sultans, the pashas, the knights, the aristocrats, right? They tend to oppose change, although not completely, because you also get reformers emerge among them. And then these are the alternative elite that will end up replacing them. During the Cold War, the Americans tended to interfere here because during the Cold War, and this is a topic for the U.S. foreign policy class, right? The Americans became really kind of paranoid that anybody that was favoring rapid change, right? Rapid change was somehow working for or maybe vulnerable to Soviet communist Moscow imperialism, communist subversion, because of course the Soviet Union is talking about socialism, radical revolution, radical change. And so the Americans became, as nation states are prone to do, paranoid. They perceive terrible threats in stereotypical terms, and they overestimate the relative power capabilities. So they intervene to try to keep these traditional elites in power during the Cold War. So, the Americans allied with the Catholic aristocratic elite in Vietnam, because these people, they tend to fear change. They're aware it can happen, and they tend to fear change, and they also tend to cooperate with outside powers to keep them in power. So these people here tend to cooperate with the French, or in the case of the Ulsan Five, the Japanese, right, intervening to protect the aristocracy from radical change in Korea. They tend to appeal to outside imperial powers to keep them in power. And of course today the Americans ally with the Saudi royal family in Saudi Arabia. the Kuwaiti royal family, the United Arab Emirates family, Zayed family ruling in the United Arab Emirates, to fight pan-Arab nationalism, because America doesn't want pan-Arab nationalism to unify the Arab people into one state, the way Vietnamese nationalism overrode the external intervention to divide Vietnam, and the way German nationalism overrode the separation of Germany into East and West Germany. Question is, how powerful is Korean nationalism? Is Korean nationalism going to eventually override the resistance of the Americans and the Chinese to the partition of Korea or not? How powerful is Korean nationalism? How powerful is pan-Arabism? Technology makes a difference. In Vietnam, you have mountainous tropical jungle. That's great. Mountainous tropical jungle is great for nullifying the American technological advantage. But, for China to unify with Taiwan, that technology still makes all the difference there. With American Navy and air power, technology will make all the difference. Where are you going to hide in the desert? Right. So the American air power and technological advantage overwhelmed, any Arab pretenses to unifying the Arabs the way Otto von Bismarck unified the Germans in the middle of the 19th century. So, but that's where the Americans tended to intervene during the Cold War. They tended to ally with the traditional ruling elite, because Americans tend to believe anybody who's talking about radical change is either working for the Moscow or is a fool, making it too easy for Moscow to expand under Soviet Moscow to expand under the Soviet Union. So, but however, if the elite traditionally adapts early enough, then the traditional elite itself can become the symbols of the new emerging nation. The best example of that, of course, is Great Britain. The ruling aristocratic elite in Great Britain accommodated change and became itself the living symbol of British nationalism. But again, British imperialism is still so much part of British identity. And that's important to understand Brexit from the European Union, right? That the British ruling family, ruling young aristocratic elite, it wasn't defeated the way the German ruling elite, Yangban, was defeated in World War I. Even in World War II, it was the Bavarian and Prussian nobility dominated the Wehrmacht, the German army, in World War I and World War II, and they lost both times. Britain hasn't lost. So, the traditional ruling elite has adapted. Obviously, the French ruling elite didn't. So it got it. Louis lost his head. I'm looking forward to seeing that film with Joaquin Phoenix on Napoleon that's coming out, I guess, this fall. They show Marie Antoinette being led to have her head chopped off in the trailer for that film. So anyway, so what are the defining characteristics of nationalism? Of course, there's 4 community bases for nationalism: racial, ethnic, territorial, and religious-based community for nationalistic behavior. You want a sovereign independent state for whom? Do you define your community, your national community, on a racial basis? Of course, Hitler played a lot with that, white racial Aryan national identity, using that to try to get support in Europe for his plans. Of course, it can be a positive progressive force in Africa. There was nationalism is not an ideology, but can it be part of an ideology? So there was this Pan-African movement, negritude movement, to try to appeal to Pan-African identity on the basis of racial identity in Africa against colonial white exploitation and imperialism. Ethnic community nationalism just tends to dominate in Europe, right? That, you're a German if you speak German and you inherited German blood from your ancestors. Even if you're your family is born and lived on Polish territory for many generations, if you're Jewish, you're not Polish, because Jews are not Poles. Pole is somebody who's Catholic and speaks Polish, supposedly. So ethnic community bases for understanding, again, this is subjectively defined, just like this is subjectively defined. And then territorial basis, this is American nationalism, Australian nationalism, Argentinian nationalism, Brazilian nationalism, countries that are immigrant societies, right? Populated by immigrants coming in. And so that's the base of American nation statehood, is this territorial identification community, imagined community of American nationalists, right? That we share a common destiny, as citizens of this territory. And it's manifested as well in notions of citizenship. Like in immigrant societies, there's a stronger notion of jus soli for determining citizenship. You're an American citizen if you're born on American territory, period. Jus soli. So again, I try to find it here, come back to this. So jus soli, this is a Latin term. And so stop share, we go to jus soli. And so search and wait for it to come back up. And so go back then to the Zoom, just a second, Zoom, go here, show you jus soli here. So this is jus soli notions of citizenship. And you can see it applies in Canada, North America, Mexico, and in these immigrant societies. And then versus, this is, you're a citizen if you're born in the territory. Right. And you can become a citizen by living on the territory. Like my father, right? He became a citizen in 1967. Versus jus sanguinis, and this tends to dominate in ethnically based community nationalisms. So jus sanguinis, oh, I screwed it up. Jus sanguinis, and let me see, make sure you see that. So share screen and jus sanguinis. So you see that Latin term sanguine, blood, law of blood, law of soli, law of territory, jus, law of blood. And so you can see. You can, in Germany, right, if your family is German for centuries living in Russia, for example, or living in what is today Serbia today, you have the right to claim citizenship in Germany because your ancestors were German, and you can prove that your ancestors are German, even though your ancestors haven't lived in Germany for 300 years. As long as you can prove that your ancestors came from Germany many generations ago. So, okay, so back to our notes here. And again, I'm trying to explain why this American Civil War happened, right? I mean, what were these people fighting for? And I guess some people make that point that, and of course, finally, just to continue on religious-based nationalism, that you are a religious community, you're a national community defined by religious community of believers, right? And perhaps that's most significant in Islamic nationalism. Islam is political Islam, right? That I don't think political Islam is a movement that's based upon religious philosophy, although that can shape it in its behavior. It's basically based upon a belief that there is a community of Muslims. The ummah is the term among Muslims. If I can find it here, ummah, right? The Arabic term for the community of believers. So I go back here again, share screen, and this is what Osama bin Laden was. He was an ummah nationalist. He wanted to unify all Muslims from including take back the territory that was lost by the evil imperialist Catholic monarchy of Isabella and Ferdinand that funded Columbus to unify and take back all this territory and create one big Islamic caliphate to liberate these Muslims from their neo-colonial oppression or outright oppression in India under the Hindu nationalist government and the Zionists and the collaborators of the royal families of the House of Saud and the Kuwaiti royal family and erase these boundaries that were drawn by the British and the French and the Italians and the Portuguese and the Spanish that are used to divide and weaken and exploit the resources of the Ummah in one big, great pan-Islamic caliphate. Yay! Right? So Osama bin Laden would be an example of a religious-based, sectarian-based community identity. Of course, Modi in Iran, in India is playing with that. Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, and his Hindu Nationalist Party is really trying to emphasize this sectarian component of Indian nationalism, even going so far as wanting to change the name away from India to Bharat as the official name of India, because India is a name given to them by the British. So again, so and I guess I'm trying to highlight here, what makes America exceptional. So again, we go back to the notes here, and so I show you these notes, and then of course, there's intensities, differing intensities of people's self-identification with a community, with a community. I have lots of in-group identifications. I think we did this in class, right? I said, describe Professor Ben, and Professor Ben belongs to in-group D. Dominiches. Professor Ben belongs to in-group Catholics. Professor Ben belongs to in-group men. Professor Ben belongs to in-group, Ohioans from Ohio. Professor Ben belongs to in-group professors. Professor Ben belongs to in-group whatever. But then you add, he also belongs to in-group America, right? And so America is my primary terminal self-identification community. If I'm your typical American citizen, I'm an American nationalist. So I'm willing to risk my life and sacrifice my career to defend America or promote America. This big community with 330 million people and very primary first intensity commitment. So first intensity commitment, I'm willing to risk my life and sacrifice my career. Second, we have multiple identities. We have multiple in-group identities, right? I'm an American, but I'm also D. Dominiches, a man, a Catholic, an Ohioan, a professor, and so on. But I have different levels of concern for those communities. Second level is I sacrifice some material point to the point that affects my lifestyle. Again, my identification as an Ohioan is pretty mild, right? If Ohio State football loses a football game, I'm going to be upset for a little bit, but I'm not going to, do much else beyond sacrifice my peace of mind. I might give a little bit of money to my Ohio State every year as my charity donation, but it doesn't really affect my lifestyle because I don't give a lot of money. I just give a little money every year. So what, right? When I give enough money that affects my lifestyle, then that's important. And of course, a lot of diaspora communities belong in this category. Like a lot of Armenians, Armenians a lot in the news these days. They live and work outside of Armenia and they send money back to Armenia. Albanians, when I was in Bulgaria, lots of Albanians were living and working in Europe and sending money back to support the Kosovo Liberation Army fighting for independence from Serbia. Lots of American Jews, they're American nationalists, but a lot of American Jews are also feel this strongly about Israel, right? That Israel for them is a life and death issue. And, they send their kids to go study in Israel for the summer or longer. And they give a lot of money to pro-Israeli organizations that work for Israel's well-being and influence in the world. So this is important. These are for diasporas, and they're important for understanding the influence on policymaking, which is more of a topic in U.S. foreign policy class, right? And so again, just to show you how America is unique. America is unique in a lot of different ways. Also, relationship of state to nation. So in this case, state and nation, remember, they're not the same. They're closely connected to each other, but they're not the same, right? There's an intimate connection between nation and state, right? Because if I'm a nationalist, what do I want? I want a sovereign state for my nation. I want it sovereign and recognized as sovereign by other nations through their states, recognizing my nation as sovereign. And there's only 200 of these states in the world, and there are thousands of different ethnic groups. So it's really great to have your own state. Now, there's only 200 of them, right? The Kurds, they'll be the first to point out they're a big ethnic minority, they're a big ethnic group. They're what, at least 30 million of them, and they don't have their own state. And that's not fair, they claim. Right? So they would like to have their own state, but you're not going to fight for your own state if you think you're all going to be slaughtered if you attempt it and fail. You give up. But the Kurds, they think, on their side, they've got the Americans. So the Americans are defending northern Iraq, which is effectively de facto independent from the rest of Iraq. Not really, but the Americans have a military base there. They're also working with the Syrian Kurds. Of course, Turkey is not very happy about that because there's 10 to 50 million Kurds living in Turkey. So status prior to nation, the nation appears within established boundaries. So this is West European states, right? Cases include France. The Kingdom of France becomes the nation state of France. The Tsardom of Russia becomes the nation state of Russia. The Japanese Empire becomes the nation state of China. The Japanese monarchy becomes the nation state of Japan, and the nation state of the English monarchy becomes the nation state of England. Of course, here you have, you still have a Japanese emperor and you still have an English king, because the ruling elite accommodated, or the Americans supported it in the case of Japan, to get the Japanese to surrender rather than try to keep nuking each of their cities. The state as colony is prior to the existence of the nation. The boundaries of the nation are arbitrary and imposed. Again, so this is US, Canada, and Latin America. Of course, the problem, this also applies to African states with the boundaries of the states arbitrarily imposed, but those are not immigrant societies, of course, for the most part. Of course, maybe in South Africa, because you have the Boer white Dutch settlers that created South Africa, but they've been displaced as the ruling elite, or at least politically. Economically, they're still dominant in South Africa. But territorial nationalism is fading in Africa because, the independence struggles against the French and the British and the Belgians and the Spanish and the Portuguese, that happened a long time ago. So ethnic nationalism that we don't like, we call tribalism, but that's ethnic nationalism on behalf of the Hutus versus the Tutsis versus the different groups. Those are ethnic groups in Africa. Those tribal groups are ethnic groups. Thirdly, the nation is prior to the nation state. The state is formed through an amalgamation of parts. So you're unifying Germany through pan-German nationalism under Bismarck. Pan-Italian movement succeeded for the most part. Pan-Slavism was strong but failed. It was strong enough to push the Russians into World War I because the Emperor of Russia claimed that I'm the protector of the Slavs. So he had to put up or shut up when Austria decided to attack Serbia in 1914, and he put up, and the Russian Empire eventually collapsed under the stress of World War I. Pan-Arabism, again, the Americans and the Zionists are fighting this. Israel must defeat Pan-Arabism for Israel to survive. Israel can't survive if the Arabs unite, and they know it, right? And so Pan-Turanism, unifying all Turks from Istanbul all the way up to Mongolia, that was a strong movement about the same time as Pan-Slavism. Pretty much faded, but still, there's some pan-Turanist elements within Turkish public opinion that Erdogan, president of Turkey, plays with. And pan-Kurdism. Will pan-Kurdism be successful in a way somehow comparable to pan-Germany and pan-Italian nationalism? Maybe, but it takes a long time, right? Right now, of course, the Americans ally with the Kurds against the Arab nationalists. So we'll see. And then finally, for Europe, a nation is prior to the nation state. The state is formed through the breakup of a multinational state, and that includes the Austro-Hungarian Empire that fell apart in the stresses of World War I, and the Ottoman Empire that fell apart also in the stresses of World War I. I already said number twos are immigrant societies. Consequently, the territory is the basis of the community has worked. Because of the political dynamics of the political mobilization process in Africa, with an imperial framework will not work there, ethnicity prevails there. You do see some examples of territorial nationalism in Africa and Asia. Supposedly Laos and Cambodia are examples of territorial nationalism, and also in North Africa, Algerian nationalism. Also, the territorial basis of national identity can change. Before World War II, Polish nationalism was focused on reuniting the territories of the Republic of Poland that existed at the end of the 18th century, even though 40% of the population was not Polish. Only 60% of the Polish population in 1939 was Polish. The other 40% were Belarusians, Lithuanians, Jews, Germans, Russians, Latvians, Estonians, whatever. But that's the territory of the Polish Republic that existed until the end of the 18th century, that was then partitioned by the Austrians, the Prussians, and the Germans. And then Hungarian nationalism, again, before World War II, focused on trying to get back the territories, the 2/3 of its territory that it lost when it was divided up at the end of World War I and the breakup of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Getting that territory back was a really driving force for Hungarian political foreign policy behavior until World War II. And then it changed. Now, Polish nationalism is ethnically based, right? A Pole is somebody who's Catholic and speaks Polish. They might have some lingering sentiment. Of course, Lukashenko in Belarus and Putin in Russia claim that Poland wants to take Lvov, Western Ukraine, and add it back to Poland because it had been part of Poland in 1939 until it was taken. You know, I don't think, you know, the Poles are willing to really go to war for Western Ukraine. Okay, so I think that's important to cover because, you know, this course is supposedly about American exceptionalism. Why is American exceptional? Why do people think America is exceptional? I mean, one of the reasons for America's economic development is that's one of the least descriptively defined societies in the world, although it's still significant in America. It's significant everywhere. Okay, so 1860. And so let me go back to our, make sure I opened up the right screen here. So here, okay, so we go back to material. And I won't disconnect me, so I have to log in again, log in, American history, material. And I posted this yesterday, so it looks like a couple of you started looking at it. Let me see again, to share screen and go back to here. And of course, so this is on the eve of the election of 1860. So the election in 1860, according to the U.S. Constitution, is on the first Tuesday in the month of November after the first Monday. So the election for president is always ending at least on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. The inauguration of the winner of the election used to be in March. It was in March because there was a, you know, this, when the United States wrote the Constitution, the fastest way of moving, of transportation, of communication was on horse. So it took time to get people to move from one place to another to establish a new U.S. administration. So Lincoln is elected in November 1860, and then he's inaugurated as president in March 1861. That will change under Franklin Delano Roosevelt in the 1930s. Franklin Delano Roosevelt will promote a constitutional amendment changing the inauguration of the president to January. So since Roosevelt, for the last 90 years, the inauguration of the winner of the presidential election in November is in January. January 21st, I think, or January 20th, not March. But in 1860, it was still March. So Lincoln is elected in November 1860. And before he becomes president in March 1861, the southern states start leaving the United States. They declare they're seceding from the Union. They're declaring their secession from the United States. And they claim, of course, it's their constitutional right to do that, that they have the right to leave the United States. And they're doing this all before Lincoln is sworn in, inaugurated as president in March 1861. So in our little exercise here, war is looming. People know long before Lincoln is elected that war is coming. And if the northern political powers representing industrialization and the booming northern economy, their candidate is Lincoln. If he wins, the southern states are threatening they're going to leave. And then the northern states will have to stop them if they want to, because they want to protect slavery. And they think that Lincoln, despite his words, he can say all he wants, but there are forces at work that are bigger than Lincoln, much bigger than any one human being, right? So you can see here, Lincoln knows this. And so here's Lincoln's statement at his first inauguration, his first inaugural address. So he makes this speech in March 4th, 1861. War is coming. Right? So he says, of course, now why is this important? Let me make sure I share the screen. This is important for a lot of reasons, including the fact that Americans are taught that Americans, boys and girls, are taught that from the time they enter school, even before, that Abraham Lincoln was a saint, a political national ideal, that he was a shining, wonderful fighter for liberty, for freedom, that the Civil War was fought to end slavery. They are always taught that the Civil War was fought to end slavery. And why is that a problem to have that belief? Because if you believe that the Civil War, in which 800,000 people died, was fought to end slavery, and the great majority of those people who fought and died were white people, then it's easier for you to say, hey, we did everything we could for black people, right? We fought a war and sacrificed and died to free the enslaved people of the South, the black people. So we've done a lot for black people. We have removed our sin. We have, through our sacrifice, I'm talking in very romantic, nationalistic terms, we sacrificed our own blood to purify the sin of slavery that was established supposedly at the foundation of the United States. And so, and of course, we white people, we freed the black people. We freed the slaves. We gave you your freedom, right? So black people, as well as white people, should support the political establishment in America, because the political establishment in America goes back to the founding of America, and then it freed the black people from enslavement. So again, the implied argument is that any problems that people face today, it's not due to white systemic supremacy, white systemic racism, or white supremacy, as the critical race theorists might argue. No, it's not because of systemic racism. We fought a war to free the slaves. We sacrificed and died by the tens, hundreds of thousands, although tens of thousands of black people did die in that war as soldiers, but they also died on the southern side, as well as on the northern side in that war. Thousands of black people fought in the war, but they died on both sides. But, and so, is that true? I mean, I can tell you from an American point of view, of course, that's what I was taught, that slavery was a bad thing, but we fought the Civil War, sacrificed lots of blood in terrible conflicts of brother against brother, father against son. Oh my gosh, so many films made about the Civil War, so many novels and stories told about it. Yes, that great, and it was all part of this process of great creation of the modern United States that exists today. And again, if you're poor, dumb, and ugly, it's your fault. It's not my fault. It's not the system's fault. It's your fault. This Gramscian hegemony notion, right? That you brainwash people to believe that if the current status quo political, economic, and cultural system is proper and ethical and morally correct. And so you brainwash them, including about history. So that's why this lesson plan is important. Was the Civil War about ending slavery? Well, let's look what Abraham Lincoln said in 1861. Apprehension seems to exist among the people of the southern state that by the accession of a Republican administration, Abraham Lincoln was a Republican Party founder, right? Their property, that's how they referred to black enslaved people. They called the southern slave owners, called their enslaved people their property. And remember, why does America exist? In the Declaration of Independence, to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which comes from John Locke, who said that God-given rights of people are to life, liberty, and the ownership of property. And then Thomas Jefferson changed that third statement from ownership of property to the pursuit of happiness. So, this is property. It's sacred to Americans, right? What I earned, what is mine, what I got through my hard work and efforts is mine. That a Republican administration, their property and their peace and personal security are to be endangered. There has never been any reasonable cause for such apprehension. Indeed, the most ample evidence to the contrary has all the while existed and been open to their inspection. It is found in nearly all the published speeches of whom who now addresses you. I mean, my speeches, Lincoln. I do not but quote from one of those speeches when I did declare that I have no purpose, directly or indirectly, to interfere with the institution of slavery in the states where it exists. I believe I have no lawful right to do so, and I have no inclination to do so. I now reiterate these sentiments, and in doing so, I only press upon the public attention the most conclusive evidence of which the case is susceptible that the property, peace, and security of no section of the United States are to be in any wise endangered by the now incoming administration. I add, too, that all the protection which, consistent with the Constitution and the laws, can be given will be cheerfully given to all the states when lawfully demanded for whatever cause, as cheerfully to one section as to another. So he's claiming, I don't want to free the slaves. I'm not going to free the slaves. I will keep slavery if necessary to keep the southern states in the United States from seceding. And then excerpt 2 from his same inaugural address. I understand a proposed amendment to the Constitution, which amendment, however, I have not seen has passed Congress, to the effect that the federal government shall never interfere with the domestic institutions of the states, including that of persons held to service. Of course, that is the term in the Constitution. The U.S. Constitution never uses the term slavery or enslavement. It talks about persons held to service. To avoid misconstruction of what I have said, I depart from my purpose not to speak of particular amendments so far as to say that holding such provision to now be an implied constitutional law, I have no objection to its being made express and irrevocable. So there was a constitutional amendment passed in the 13th Amendment of the U.S. proposed amendment of the Constitution to protect slavery wherever it exists in the states where it exists. So he's promising he's going to do that. Okay, so we now go then to the original purpose of the Constitution. And but before we do that, let's go to the exercise, right? And so we close that, and then we go to back to the share screen, and we look at material, and we go here to Lincoln 2. Oh, sorry, I gotta mess around with this thing here. Get this out of the way. Okay, now that's the Emancipation Proclamation. We need to talk about that now. So, so again, but we're going to step back a moment and talk about the U.S. presidential election in 1860. And let me see if I can go back to it here. Stop share, share screen. Here you go, here. And so these are the 4 candidates running for president. And there you see Stephen Douglas for the Lincoln-Douglas debate format that you're supposed to sign up for to participate in the debate. And you can see the results of the election, that Lincoln wins because he gets 180 of the Electoral College votes, which is apparently looks like it's a good majority, right? There are 4 candidates. Lincoln doesn't get a majority of the popular vote. When you add up all the popular votes, you can see that Lincoln doesn't get a majority of the popular votes, not even close, right? When you add up all the votes, but he gets a majority of the Electoral College votes. And I guess, again, this reminds us that the U.S. presidential elections are not direct elections for the U.S. presidency. We're electing on the basis of individual state elections that are happening in November or end in November. So there are 50 different elections, of course, fewer back then in 1860. And then the results of those state elections are calculated to give the Electoral College vote. So Lincoln got, these states colored in red. So 3, 7, 11, 15, 20, 26, 37, 50, 73, and you add them all up, you get 180. And so what we're going to do now is divide up in the class among the different groups as to who you're going to vote for in this upcoming election among these 4 candidates. John Breckinridge is from Kentucky. Kentucky does not vote to leave the United States, but it has slavery. So it's one of these border states that votes, that votes for the Southern candidate that wants to defend slavery. So he will lose, and then he will become the Secretary of War in the, I think the Secretary of War in the Confederacy after he loses his election to Lincoln. He becomes the Confederate Secretary of War. He runs for the Southern Democratic Party. John Bell is for the Constitution Party. You can see he wins Kentucky, he wins Tennessee, and he wins Virginia. The main focus of this Constitutional Union Party is to try to avoid having a war fought on their territory. Their primary objective is to avoid war because they believe that most of this war is going to be fought on their territory. And in fact, not so much is fought in Kentucky, but a lot of the war is fought in Tennessee and, of course, in Virginia. And then there's Stephen Douglas representing the Democratic Party that doesn't want secession from the South like the Southern Democratic Party does. And he only wins Missouri. Missouri and some other small entity. New Jersey. I think it says New Jersey. He gets some of the New Jersey vote, and so who are you going to support in this upcoming presidential election? Again, Howard Zinn book is analyzing history from a Marxist framework. So Marxists focus upon class and economic interests of class. So we're going to divide up into different groups on the basis of major economic constituencies in the United States in 1860. And who are you going to support in this upcoming election? Lincoln, Breckinridge, Bell, or Douglas? And so let me go back to the material here. And again, make sure I share the right screen, share screen, go back here. Also need to find out who's in the class. So who's here now? And so who's in attendance? Let me see here. How to do this on Zoom. This is the first time I've done this on Zoom since the pandemic. So we go stop share. Let me see who's participating, who's here now. And we have Rachel, Mr. Park, Mr. Park Jiul, Mateo, Jean Noel, Jeun Pak, Evgenia, Emma, Kalis, Abby, and let's see, who's the 202 number? I don't know. Who is the 202 number? Who is 203-2329-207? Who is that? Can you speak up? Who is that person?
Yes.
Was that Shini?
Shiny.
Shiny. Okay, Shiny. Okay, so I see who's here. So we have Abby, She, Kalis, Emma, Evgenia, Jeun, Mateo, Jiul, Rachel, Shiny, and Sunwoo. And so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10. Woo! That means 2 per groups. So Emma and Abby G. Emma and Abby G. Emma and Abby G. You are Emma and Abby G. You are. Let's see. Scroll down here. You are Lincoln. Hooray! Emma and Abby Z. You are Lincoln. Lincoln. So you're running for president, and try to explain to these people why they should support you for president. Because you are the Republican candidate for you can see that, right? I got to make sure.
Sir, I'm really sorry. Currently I'm in Busan and I'm in the transport, so it will be really hard for me to work. I will try to do my best, but I'm not sure I will be really.
What about Abby? Abby. You can be Abby J. Abby.
Yes.
Okay, Abby. You're going to be Abraham Lincoln. So you are the Republican candidate for president of the United States. Let me make sure you can
Thank you
see
very
it,
much.
because I don't know if you can see that. I got to make sure you can see that. So I go like this, and I go like this, and share. Okay, so there it says, this is obviously an important position. You are the Republican candidate for president of the United States in 1860. Most of your life, you've been a politician, a professional politician. In fact, you were only 23 years old when you first ran for office. Remember, this man is on the $5 note. Do I have any $5 notes here? I probably don't. No, I don't have any $5. He's on the $5 note, right? So, we talked about, Alexander Hamilton and, Andrew Jackson. Abraham Lincoln is on the $5 note. So, the only time you weren't in politics was for a few years back when, because your party was too weak, you left political life to work as a lawyer. Your friends say that you are very ambitious. Ambition, modernity, right? Modernity, status through ambition and achievement, and that you want most of this world is to be president. Right? It's never easy to run for president, but these days it's especially difficult with the country deeply divided. Historically, you have been politically cautious and have not taken unpopular stands on issues. For example, in private, you tell people that how much you dislike slavery, but publicly you have never said that slavery should be abolished where it currently exists. In fact, in public, you never even speak out against the fugitive slave law, which required Northerners in free states to help capture escaped slaves. In private, you wrote, "I confess I hate to see the poor creatures hunted down, but I bite my lips and keep quiet." You are no abolitionist and have strongly condemned those abolitionists, the people that want to abolish slavery, like John Brown, who broke the law and used violence in their efforts to stop slavery. However, you have always said that slavery should not be spread to new states, any new states or territories. So the United States is expanding out west. And that's always been the big concern particularly among the southern slaveholding states, that if a northern new state joins the United States, that a slave state must be added to balance, to keep a political balance, at least in the US Senate, where each state gets 2 senators. And that's becoming increasingly hard to do. You're running out of territory that you can add where slavery makes any sense economically. You believe that what makes this a great country is the opportunity it provides for its free citizens. If you work hard, you can rise and succeed. Remember, achievement, status through achievement. Right? Look at you. Your parents were not rich, and now you may become president. By the way, I should tell you, and the Koreans can confirm, right, that in Korean law, it is still in the books that a Korean doctor is not supposed to tell a pregnant Korean woman what is the sex of her unborn baby, because of this ascriptive legacy of ascriptive status, right? That supposedly boy babies are better than girl babies. So unfortunately, in much of the world, not in Korea, not in South Korea anyway, but in much of the world still, there's this ascriptive bias against female babies, that boy babies are better. And so there are millions and millions of girl babies that are aborted before they're born, or may even be killed, have been killed after they were born, because some poor family in India, not in Korea, but some poor family in India, has too many children and they can't afford another baby, and that baby that's born is a girl. So unfortunately, something bad happens to that girl. So that legacy of ascription, right, that you don't have to do anything. You're just born. If you're born a boy, you're better. You don't do anything to earn that. You don't achieve that status. You're just born that way. It's still present in Korea, at least it's not in place anymore in terms of people's thinking, but it's still on the legal books, right? So ascription doesn't go completely away. But again, my personal sense is that South Korea is one of the least descriptively defined places in the world. And I think it's got something to do with, I mean, the brutality of the Japanese, and then the Japanese occupation, and then the Korean War. I mean, that just revolutionarily transformed a lot of ways Korea. Right now, what you want most is to be elected. That will require you to convince people who have very different interests and ideas to compromise and to see that your positions are the best. You will be able to please some of the people on some of the issues, but not all the people on all the issues. Good luck. In the campaign period, you will meet with as many of the groups as you can, listen to their concerns, and test out some of your positions. They will also be talking to each other to try to build alliances so that they can urge you to adopt their positions on various issues. Hint, in order to win, you will probably need a majority of at least 3 of the 4 groups. So you need to make promises and compromises with at least 3 of 4 of the 4 other groups in order to win this election in 1860. So you gotta make promises and trade-offs to them, right? For them to vote for you. Okay, so I don't know if we have time to go through all 5 of the different groups. So the first 2, Abby and Emma, the next, Khalees and Evgenia. Okay, Emma, people move around. So hold on a second. Okay, Abby and Khalees. Abby, you be Lincoln. Abby and Khalees, you be Lincoln. Emma and Evgenia, you can be, close this, and then go back to share screen. And did I close the screen? No. Okay, then we go here, share, and we go back to material, and we go back to Northern factory owners and merchants. You are the representatives of the new emerging economy, right? And so again, I got to flip this around so you can see it. So you are the major political rivals are the Southern landowners. Let me again make sure you can see this. So you can see slave owners, sorry, almost all of whom are Democrats. Just about everything you support, they oppose. You need the cheap cotton they send north, and you need them to buy your products, but you don't need them to get any stronger in Congress. So you are in favor of developing your own economy, right? So that's an important point, that you want American government to adopt policies that will protect you from British imports, British manufacturer imports, because you want to develop your own manufacturers. And competing against Britain is a bit of a challenge, right? The Southern slave owners growing cotton, they want good trade relations with Britain because Britain buys their cotton. Britain is buying their cotton. You know, Britain is the cradle of the Industrial Revolution. So you want tariffs on imports from Britain. The Southern slave owners don't want tariffs on imports from Britain because they want good trade relations with Britain. You also want more infrastructure. You want more and more transportation. You want to expand. You want to exploit those resources out west that are just waiting for you to exploit them to make more money. You want to sell more products by populating people moving out there. If people move out in those territories to become new states, then they have to buy, clothes and guns and the like. And of course, the government will have to build railroads, and they're going to buy your steel to build those railroads. Of course, you are confronting also the Southern slave owners. Also, you also confronting farmers and workers who want access to that free land. So you're kind of bothered about these promises of free land if these workers and farmers move out west and populate the new territories, because then these people are going to leave your job, that your factory where you're employing them, and that means that you're going to have to pay them more to keep them working in your factory when they can go out west and start a farm. It's very, very difficult, right, to start a farm in the middle of nowhere. There's no roads, nothing. You have to just go out there and do it on your own. But still, there's this big dream that you can go out there and there's this free land that you can take. it's not free. You have to take it from the Indians. So the Indians are being killed and put on reservations. So, what do you, Abraham Lincoln, what are you going to promise those people? What are you going to promise these northern factory owners and merchants if Abraham Lincoln is going to promise, say, the northern workers and farmers that they can go out west? What is Abraham Lincoln probably going to promise to the northern factory owners to get them to accept developing and expanding and encouraging people to move and migrate to the new territories? Your workers, to encourage them to move. What is he likely to promise them? And of course, that's a hint about immigration, right? That America is going to become very open to immigration. It needs immigrants to work in these factories. So as these American workers are leaving the factories in Boston and Philadelphia, New York, to go take land out west, the American government is going to replace them by encouraging immigration from Europe. So that's the kind of promises you have to make in order to get people keep moving around on this list, and I don't know. So I had Emma and Abby as Abraham Lincoln. Now we're back to Khalees and Eugenia. You are the northern factory owners and merchants. What's going on? Why do people keep moving on this? Okay. Okay. So then third group, we stop the share and we go to share screen. And
Sir, I'm really sorry, but I don't know in which group am I supposed to
you're Emma,
go?
you're Lincoln.
Okay, but because I will be in the transport for the entire hour, and I don't have my laptop, so it's going to be really hard for me to work. I'm
Well,
really
you can still
sorry.
make a speech. You can, maybe people around you think you're crazy because you're talking to your phone. You can talk into your phone, make a political speech as Abraham Lincoln, rallying the country to support you in the upcoming election.
Yeah, but I will have to change the classes, so I won't be. I'm sorry, I won't be really attentive to the class. I will try to do
Abby
my
will
best.
help you. We'll let Abby speak, and then if you feel like you're able to add something to what Abby has to say,
Okay.
Abby will then.
Okay.
Okay. So you're
No problem. Thank you.
Lincoln's Vice President Hannibal, who's running as his Vice President, the senator from Maine. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
And go back to material here, and so. Yeah, northern merchants and let me see here. So and northern workers. So again, go back to Zoom, northern workers, Zoom. What happened here? So click there. So share screen, northern workers. So we go to northern workers, and so northern workers. Click here on northern workers, and we go here, and northern workers, and of course I have to stop the share. And go back to this, northern workers. And so the northern workers are Jeun and Mateo, northern workers. So, of course, the main focus here, not your only concern, if you are in favor of ending slavery, all of these Black people that have been enslaved and could not be paid, they're going to want jobs where they can be paid. Jeun and Mateo. They're going to want jobs where they can be paid. And that means they're going to compete with you for jobs. And that means it might put some pressure on your wages. Because currently these enslaved people, they're not being paid for their work. But if you have to pay them, then they're going to compete with you. And that's going to drive down maybe your wages. So on one hand, you might not favor the ending of slavery. On the other hand, still, these people are free labor, and they're still competing against you now. Maybe not right away, because of course this is concentrated in the South. But the Confederate States, they want to expand slavery all through the United States. So potentially these Southern slave owners, they want the right to go to Ohio or Wisconsin or Minnesota or California and set up a factory and bring their enslaved people with them to work in that factory, right? And so in some way, you're still going to compete with those enslaved people, maybe even more so if there's accommodation and promises made to the Southern slaveholders that we're going to make it easier for you to keep your slaves and make money in this new United States economy that we're building. So you might have mixed feelings about that. Also, these even if you are if you want to go out west and maybe leave the factory that where you're working in New York City or Philadelphia or Pittsburgh, and you want to go out west and make your own fortune by starting your own land as a homesteader out west and taking a homestead, because the U.S. government is encouraging people or wants to encourage people to go out west and take land for free. Yeah, that seems like a way to gain social mobility, to gain money and pursue happiness, right, in that way. But at the same time, you have these Southern slave owners that they have free agricultural workers that work for them as enslaved people. How are you going to compete against them? Now, I know they're growing cotton and tobacco, but nothing's stopping them from also growing corn and wheat and or doing anything. So the point is, you have a lot of mixed feelings about slavery and whether or not to abolish it. You do know that, wow, it would be really nice if you could go out west and take that land from the Indians and establish your own farm for free land. But the Southern slave owners, they're hesitant about expanding the United States because, you really can't grow cotton and use enslaved labor in traditional industries in northern parts of this expanding United States. So again, decide who you're going to support and why you're going to support them among those four candidates. So northern merchants and factory owners, northern workers, and the other groups, make sure you explain who you're going to support from among those four candidates, right? And who you think is going to most promote your own material economic interests. Because this is the framework of the class, this Marxian framework. Again, that's the theme in the Zen book, that again, American students are brainwashed in this Gramscian hegemony notion that, oh, this current system that exists to maximize freedom and dignity of the individual, when really American history has been about competing class interests, rising and declining economic classes in conflict and combat with each other. And of course, in the midterm, which is due, next Saturday, and you're supposed to sign up for a conference session with me for me to discuss your midterm papers. That's a criticism by Daniel Flynn of Howard Zinn, that Howard Zinn's book is just this Marxist propaganda novel about America being all about materialist greed and self-interest, not about higher ideals, about pursuing individual dignity and freedom. Oh, no. It's all about, according to Daniel Flynn, that's Howard Zinn attacks this belief that somehow there's anything ennobled or ideologically, ethically normative driving American economic and political and cultural development. It's all about greed, according to Howard Zinn in Flynn's view, in Daniel Flynn's view. You can read it in that essay, right, that you're supposed to look at. He says that explicitly. And then Pak Chiul and Rachel, you are, let's see here, go here. You are material. Rachel, you are, boo, Southern plantation owners. The Southern plantation owners, boo, boo, boo. You're the ones who own slaves. You're the ones who will lead the effort to leave the United States. Again, make sure that I'm sharing the screen, because each time I open up a file, I have to reshare the screen. So there you can see Southern plantation owners. Again, you can read that on your own. You can try to make an argument as to whom you're going to support in the election. But of course, slavery's been in place in the United States for what, 250 years at this point. By 1860, enslavement and enslaved people have been in America since at least 1619, maybe even earlier. So say 240 years. Now, you've made investments in this for generations. The founders of America, the people that we were taught to idolize, George Washington owned enslaved people, Thomas Jefferson owned enslaved people, and now all of a sudden you're the bad guy. You're the bad guy. Boo, bad guy. So, so who are you going to support in this election? And so you can go ahead and read through the statement here on your own. And finally, the last two are Shiny and Sun Woo. And Shiny and Sun Woo are, let's go here, our material. You are Western farmers. You're the ones that are moving out west and want this free land. And make that here and stop share and make sure you can see this. So we go to Western farmers. So Shiny and Sin Woo, you are Western farmers, and you own no slaves. Some of you were born in the United States, but many of you come from other countries like Germany and Great Britain. Like farmers everywhere, you want the best land you can get. Those of you who live in states like Ohio and Illinois, think about moving somebody to Western territories like Kansas, Nebraska, where there is plentiful, rich land and good amounts of rainfall. For all of you, perhaps your biggest worry is that Southerners will move into the territories and bring their slaves with them. You hate slavery, not because you believe that all people are created equal, but because slave labor would cheapen your labor. Any crop grown by slaves can be sold more cheaply. So yeah, I mean, there's nothing really stopping cotton growers from growing grain and wheat and corn to feed the workers in emerging factories, right? Because that's the claim, that basically as these industries are emerging and mines and new kinds of economic enterprises are emerging that require urban workers or workers in factories and in mines, you got to feed these people. And that means you need beef, and you need grains to feed that beef, that bulgogi. You need more kinds of agriculture that's commodities to support an industrializing society. And so people need to buy their food in stores. And that means they're not going to raise their own food. They're going to buy their food in stores, and you're going to grow that food, right? So what's going to keep, potentially, if you're going to avoid war, what's going to keep those Southern landowners from saying, okay, you want to avoid war, then we Southern plantation owners, we must have the right in the law of the United States to say, to go to Wisconsin or go to Lincoln, Nebraska, or go to Kansas. Let's say go to Kansas or Nebraska and start a plantation growing corn or growing wheat for pong, for bread, right? With enslaved labor. And of course, there starts to be a war already, even before the Civil War, in Nebraska and Kansas, as on the borders with the South, the Southern slave owners want to expand slavery into Kansas, Nebraska, and instead of growing cotton, grow wheat. All right. Any crop grown by slaves can be sold more cheaply. How can you compete against people who work for free? Let the slave owners keep their slaves in the South where they've always been. But every year, slave owners get more bold. In 1854, Congress repealed the Missouri Compromise that outlawed slavery in Kansas and Nebraska. In 1857, the Dred Scott decision, the Supreme Court ruled that a slave owner can take slaves wherever he wants, and Congress can't say anything about it. These slave owners have to keep away from free farmers like you. For a long time, there's been talk of the government giving good land in the West to farmers who will work it themselves. Congress passed a Homestead Act recently, but President Buchanan, a Democrat, vetoed it. Maybe you'd move and maybe you wouldn't, but you would sure like the choice. Perhaps you could sell your farm for a profit and move west onto better land. Another concern of yours these days is transportation. Travel is slow. There's no way to get way out west to California, Oregon, except by wagon. And if you move further west, how would you get manufactured goods like guns, stoves, and tools from the East? And you'd need some quick and safe way to get your products to market in the East. So who are you going to support in this upcoming election? And again, just to go back to the questions that were, I thought I opened them, but I don't see them open here. So again, so scroll back down here. And so these are the election issues, right? And should make sure you can see this. So should slavery be allowed in the southern states where it currently exists? Why or why not? Should slavery be allowed in the Western territories? Why or why not? Should the U.S. government begin giving homesteads to people who are willing to work it themselves? Why or why not? Should tariffs on imported goods be increased? Why or why not? Should the United States government use tax money to support the building of railroads across the country? And list the issues that your group feels most strongly about. So address those issues, and as you're trying to decide who you're going to support in the upcoming presidential election, in order to understand why it is that when Lincoln won, and he's saying all these things like, oh, no, I'm not going to threaten slavery. Even after he's elected in November 1860, the southern states start leaving the United States, and they all leave before he's inaugurated as president in March 1861, despite his words or promises not to threaten slavery. So, of course, we only have, not even 20 minutes left, so we're not going to get through this. So I'll go through these different groups. You have a few minutes to decide your position on these issues. You can pick one that you most want to talk about, and then I'll flip a coin and pick one of you to speak first as to what your position is on these issues. Remember, you're trying to campaign for president. You're trying to campaign to get to elect one of these four candidates for president. So keep that in mind. You're trying to make an argument that appeals to an audience of voters who will vote for the candidate you want to win. Lincoln, Breckinridge, Bell, or Douglas. And so you can just pick one of these issues. And I'll tell you what, maybe I'll flip a coin and tell you which one to pick. So Lincoln, I want you to focus on heads, it's 1 through 3, and it's tails. So heads, it's 4, and it's tails. Heads, it's 5. So Lincoln, it's 6. So, list the issues that you, Lincoln, feel most strongly about. And the next one is, what's the next one? The next one is Northern factory owners. Yes, okay, Northern factory owners. So Northern factory owners, heads, your 1 through 3, and it's heads. Northern factory owners, heads, your 1, it's tails. Northern factory owners, heads, it's 2. Yes, Northern factory owners, should slavery be allowed in the Western territories? Why or why not? Next group is the Northern workers. So Northern workers, heads, your 1 through 3, and it is tails. So heads, your 4, and it's tails. Heads, your 5, and it's 6. So again, Northern workers, what issues do you feel most strongly about? And back to the Southern plantation owners. So again, did I just close that? I think I did. Sorry about that. So we go here to, again, I go back to share screen, and heads, it's 1 through 3, it's tails. Heads, it's 5, and it's tails. Heads, it's 4, and it's heads. So Northern workers, should tariffs be on imported goods be increased? Why or why not? So that's for I think Northern workers. So was that Northern workers? Yes. Southern plantation owners. Southern plantation owners. You are heads, it's 1 through 3. Heads, you're 1, and it's heads. So should slavery be allowed in the southern states where it currently exists? Why or why not? And Western farmers, the last group, heads 1 through 3, and it's heads. Heads, it's number 1, it's tails. Heads, it's 2, and it's tails. So should the U.S. government be giving homesteads to people who are willing to work it themselves? Why or why not? So you've got a couple minutes to come up with a statement. to try to explain your position on these issues and why everybody should vote for Lincoln or Douglas or Bell or Breckinridge in the upcoming election.
Sir, can I ask a question?
Of course.
I'm the Northern Workers, and I forgot which question I was supposed to do.
Oh, I can't remember which one. Pick one.
Um,
Want me to flip a coin? Northern Workers. Okay, heads, you're 1 through 4. It's heads. Heads, you're 1 or 2. Tails, you're a 3. And it is tails. 3. Should the government be giving homesteads to people who are willing to work it themselves? Why or why not?
okay, thank you.
2 minutes. One minute. Okay, so this is politics. So who's going to speak first? So the first one to speak is going to be, let me flip a coin here. And of course, I want you all to participate in this, so to make this really exciting. So you're all excited about this. So we go here, back to the this screen. And so we have here, let's see, flip a coin, and heads, it's Lincoln or Northern factory workers. And it's heads, it's Lincoln. It's Lincoln. Okay, Abraham Lincoln, what is your position on one of these issues? So make sure you can see this. And we go here. What is your position on what issue do you want to speak on? Lincoln? Abby? Abby? Unmute yourself. Yeah, okay, so which issue are you going to speak on?
The first question.
Okay, should slavery be allowed in the southern states, Lincoln, where it currently exists?
I agree.
Yay! It should be
Because
allowed. Okay.
if I don't allow the slavery, I have to think how to envision the future of slavery in the United States and how can we ensure the stability of the Southern economy.
Yeah, I mean, war is a major issue, right? I mean, you don't really know how it's going to turn out when you start a war. I mean, that same point is being made about the Russia-Ukraine war. War is very, very unpredictable. This is a war, an existential war. I mean, it's of course, Lincoln can be criticized for, not really being willing to abolish slavery, but he was more interested in avoiding war. A war that, we don't know what the results would have been. Of course, as I mentioned, the southern states would desperately attempt to appeal to France in particular, but also to Britain, but particularly to France, to get the French to intervene, to recognize the Confederate States. I mean, because they knew or believed that they needed help to beat the North. And just as, for example, the United States colonies needed help from France to beat Britain in the 1776 Independence War. So who knows who's going to intervene potentially in this? So Lincoln is willing to say whatever he can say in order to prevent war, although there are limits, right? He says he will allow slavery to continue to exist where it currently exists in the southern states, but he doesn't say he's willing to allow it to expand further, right? And I guess that would be the real commitment that the southern states would want to believe, that are you really going to allow slavery everywhere in the United States? And of course, even the Supreme Court seemed to imply in the 1857 Dred Scott decision that, yeah, southern slave owners, they can move from Alabama to Ohio or Alabama to Wisconsin and take their slaves with them and keep them there and do whatever they want with them in Wisconsin or Ohio or California. But even that wasn't enough to persuade the southern states, right, that they could stay in the United States and maintain their so-called way of life. That their so-called way of life, rightly or wrongly, they believed required that they try to create their own independent sovereign country. Okay, and so we only have a few minutes left, so let's go to the other group, and that is who's going to speak next. So we go to share screen, we go to flip a coin, and it is this time Northern factory workers are heads, and I'm sorry, Northern factory workers, and it's tails. So it's the bottom two, and the bottom two are Southern plantation owners and Western farmers. Head, it's the Southern plantation owners, and it is heads. So Southern plantation owners, would you please speak as to the position that you have on whether or not slavery should be maintained? So who's the Southern plantation owner? Who are the Southern plantation? Remind me who the Southern.
I was one of the two people.
Is that Khalees?
No, Rachel.
Rachel, okay, Rachel. Which of these issues do you want to speak on?
I focused on the first issue.
Should slavery be allowed in the southern states where it currently exists? Why or why not?
So, as a southern plantation owner, I believe that slavery, should be allowed in the southern states where it already exists, because as a plantation owner, my well-being and like my whole living depends on plantations and therefore on slaves, and that has been the case for generations. So my question is, why should it stop now? Because as you all know, the pursuit of happiness, and in my case it is, I believe I want to achieve prosperity based on my plantation, so it's a fundamental right in the United States. So I believe slavery should be allowed where it exists already in the southern states, but also in any other state. And that is why my vote will go to John Breckinridge, that I believe will protect my rights.
Yeah, if he had won the election you know, I guess maybe that would have prevented the war from happening, but he didn't even come close to winning, right? So in terms of the electoral college votes anyway, I mean, when you look at the Wikipedia page, and I don't know what I did with it. Did I close it? I must have closed it, right? So if we go to US election 1860, that he got a lot of votes. He got a lot of votes, but nowhere near what Lincoln got. But it's interesting that people knew that this was coming, right? That people knew that this was coming if in terms of the outcome of the election. Of course, we didn't have public opinion polls and surveys back then. Maybe people really didn't know. We just assumed that, you know, that we know through public opinion surveys who's going to win the election. But of course, we don't have that at this time. You don't really know the outcome of the election until you have the election. Okay, so we're running out of time here. So next group, and that is heads is Northern factory owners, and it is tails. So heads is Western farmers. So Western farmers, yes, Western farmers. Who's representing the Western farmers?
Oh, I am.
Okay, so Western farmers, what position do you want to issue do you want to take up?
Oh, we choose no, I choose we choose number 3.
Uh-huh.
And about this, I think they should give, because homesteads will give a huge opportunities for the people who want to grow up the farms. When people do farming more on a better position, USA will be more stronger than before. You know, there will be more things to produce. They can export more. So about this, actually, I'm not so sure which candidate should I pick. Like which candidate will give this policy to the reality.
Uh-huh. Well, you have to choose somebody, right?
If it's like that, I would pick President Lincoln.
Yeah, I mean, even during the war itself, in the 1860s, when the war was still going on, or in the early 1860s, the Lincoln administration and the Congress did pass the Homestead Act. It was passed even when the war is going on, right? In other words, James Buchanan, the previous president, tried to prevent war by vetoing that. But, you know, the war started. Okay, we got to fight the war. We don't have to, we're not going to stop a war. The war's going on. And they passed that law and to make the Homesteading Act adopted, because it became clear by 1863 that the South was going to lose. It's just a matter of time, right? It's just a matter of time after the first of in 1863. And okay, and so we're running out of time here. Next group to speak is Northern factory owners and merchants. Northern factory owners and merchants. So Northern factory owners and merchants, what's your position on these issues? And who's the Northern factory owners? Khalees and Evgenia. Who's going to speak? Khalees?
Yes, so I decided to be focused on the homesteads.
Yeah.
So the third questions, because I'm really worried about my workers, because I'm a merchant, needing to become farmers. So I want to vote for someone, like for a candidate who's gonna like not allowed homesteads.
Okay, so you don't want to allow homesteads.
No, I don't want.
No. Okay, interesting. Well, what will be promised, of course, is to compensate you, is to allow lots of immigrants to come in from Europe to replace them. So there'll be millions of migrants moving into North America, particularly after the Civil War. I mean, it's going on long before the Civil War, but it really accelerates after the Civil War. So that's the compensation that these people, you'll have your workers in return for accepting the pro-business, pro-expansionist policies of the Lincoln administration. Evgenia, do you have anything to add? Evgenia?
No.
Jaeun? Park Jaeun?
Like as a northern worker, about the homesteads, I do agree with giving homesteads, but under one condition, given exceptional to the slave owners, because we won't able to compete the amount of people that they are controlling because we are free and only single workers.
Mateo?
Yes.
What do you have to add?
Personally, I would maybe like focus on the second question.
Which one?
About like should slavery be allowed in the Western territories?
Should it be, or yes or no?
I would like say yes for the economy, because even though like this is not really good for the workers, I think like this is more benefits for the rich people, because like it's really increased like the economy, and this is like less how do you say that, we work more with our plantation, and we don't really need like out art project like to enter the territory though. So I think this is slavery is more beneficial.
Okay. Jiul. Park Jiul.
Yes.
Which issue do you want to speak to?
Question number one, and my opinion is same as Rachel, and my opinion is without slavery, our quality of life is different. So I want, as a Southern plantation, I want to vote John Breckenridge. That's
Okay.
all.
And Shiny. Shiny,
Yes.
did you speak?
No.
Okay, which issue?
The second one.
Should it be slavery be allowed?
Personally, I think no. I think slavery shouldn't be allowed in the West because as a farmer who uses his own labor to farm every day, once slavery is allowed, it means that my labor will also become cheap.
Aha. Okay. All right. So let me stop the share and then let me try to do something here and see if I can still do this. So I don't know if I can still do this because I'm it's been a while since I've done anything. So no. Well, I guess I can't do it. I thought I could do a poll here, but it used to allow me to make polls, but I don't think I can make polls here. So, well, maybe I can't. So let me just do it on the course website. So let me do one more thing. Let me go here. We go put share screen. We go here and ask you to vote on add. Let's see, go here, 6, vote. And so you can go Lincoln, Bell, Douglas, Breckenridge. And so it's anonymous, post result, and you can vote until 12 o'clock. Oh, shit. 12 o'clock. And so ask you to vote now anonymously for one of the 4 candidates. So you can vote anonymously for one of the 4 candidates. So please vote. It looks like Lincoln's gonna win. Okay, well, I guess that's it for today. Okay, so we'll have a debate on Wednesday. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.